Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this special meeting that was postponed from last week's meeting. I'd like to welcome each and every one of you here as we get down to the finish line. First order of business will be a roll call by our city clerk.
Please pledge allegiance.
Sorry, I meant Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As I said earlier, it's now time for a roll call by our city clerk.
There is, okay. Sunday Black.
Present.
Jeffrey Green.
Here.
William Colo.
He is traveling and not present, but I hear a phone ringing over here.
Yeah, well, one moment. Charles Pagano.
Present.
William Pizzuto.
Here.
Roberto Rodriguez.
Here.
Michael Salvio.
Here.
Joyce Templeton.
Here.
7 present, 1 absent. I'll answer the phone.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry about not to interrupt, but Mr. Colo are you joining us? Are you able to participate, Mr. Colo?
I can barely hear you, but I'm getting ready to board a plane in a few minutes.
Okay. Well, when you board the plane, you're not going to be able to participate.
Right. So wait off until you land up at, I believe you're going to Bradley.
Yeah. Why don't you call in when you land? It'll be up to the commission to decide whether
Right.
we're going to roll with or without you. But if you can call into this number when you land, you can let me know.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yes. That's okay. Thank you. We've been given the minutes from the last meeting. I've glanced over them myself. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
The minutes are approved. Next item is the introduction of written public commentary. Is that Attorney Casagrande? Although, Mike, you have something to bring up?
No.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. I just have a few housekeeping items. Want to introduce just a few more exhibits. The first exhibit, which I'd like to hand up, is exhibit number 27, and that is copies of all of the 36 maps, which I understand the chair made available to all the commission members several days ago. I'm only going to hand up one because all of you have copies of them, and I understand that you've understood them. So I'd like to hand up exhibit 27. The next exhibit, which I'd like to hand up, is a copy of Dr. Morrison's resume, which I had neglected to submit into the record at previous hearings, and I will have more to say about that when we get to the point of your deliberations, but I'd like to hand up 9 copies of Exhibit 28, Dr. Morrison's resume. And the last physical exhibit I'd like to hand up is Exhibit 29, which is copies of the handout that Dr. Morrison has prepared, which shows the demographics of the 3 alternative plans before you, what we've been calling Butler 1, Morrison 2, and Morrison 3, together with each handout has his breakdown of the parameters And my associate, Ms. Miranda, has copies of the handout that she can hand out to any member of the public who'd like to see it. But I'm going to hand up 9 copies of Exhibit 29.
Okay, thank you.
And just to move things along, Mr. Chairman, the last 2 exhibits we have are website submissions. The first one we've numbered it number 8-star, because apparently there's another Exhibit 8 that was already entered into the record. So we're calling this 8-star, and that is from Mr. Christopher Boulier. I believe I have the name right. And the last website submission is Exhibit number 11, which is a submission by Christopher Ursini. So I'm going to hand up 9 copies of website 8-star and website 11. That concludes the presentation of physical exhibits and website exhibits. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Morrison now. I would like to respectfully reserve just a few minutes of your time after public comment to kind of sum up where we are and give you my view of things. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. You have a choice tonight among the 3 Alderman district plans that are before you. Each of these plans responds to what Waterbury citizens and what you commission members have urged me to focus on as your collective objectives, the core principles that unify your community, a community organized around established neighborhoods, not separated along racial and ethnic lines. You have stressed to me that these shared interests centered on strong neighborhoods matter most, not the differences that often divide and separate voters in other communities. And in that respect, I want to tell you that Waterbury is a remarkable community, remarkable as an exception to the rule that districts tend to divide communities into us and them. I've heard many speakers here over the past month or so refer to us and we, but I have yet to hear anyone utter the word them. Each plan before you tonight will reinforce those core principles which unify you as a community. Yes, some neighborhoods will now be joined differently, but under 2 of these plans, nearly all neighborhoods have been kept intact. On balance, most citizens will benefit from more effective political representation, and most important, that representation will spring from all voters, broadly empowered across the city. But you must understand what distinguishes and differentiates these plans. Representative Butler's original plan was helpful. My thanks to him. The 2 subsequent plans I devised, Morrison Plan Number 2 and Morrison Number 3, have followed the logic of his original plan, and in addition, my 2 plans incorporate further suggestions from the public, and they add further technical refinements designed to narrow the city's exposure to potential litigation. And so you have 2 other plans before you, Morrison 2 and Morrison 3. My plan number 3 is the better of the 2, I believe. and here's why. Plan 3 goes furthest in advancing the central objective of unifying neighborhoods that would remain split in Representative Butler's original plan. Furthermore, Plan 3 reduces the prospect of a lawsuit. And it is the one plan I would feel most confident defending in court were I called as an expert to testify on your behalf. In drawing Plan 3, I know what I did, and that was to balance your legitimate criteria while complying with the Voting Rights Act and its requirements. A decision on your part to adopt my plan, number 3, would not be a rejection of Mr. Butler's plan. My further statistical refinements embodied in Plan 3 add a critical layer of insulation against legal challenge. Representative Butler's original plan lacks that protection. You retained my firm to narrow the city's exposure to litigation while responding to citizens' desires to reinforce traditional neighborhood communities of interest. And community of interest is the term of art mentioned as one of the legitimate redistricting criteria in the Voting Rights Act. That is what I did, and that is why I urge you to recommend Plan 3. Furthermore, recognize the consequences of instead favoring Representative Butler's original plan instead of my Plan 3. Rejecting either one of my two plans would be a rejection of what I have publicly urged you to adopt based on my professional judgment. Ignoring that judgment and the technical considerations on which my judgment rests has the effect of labeling me Exhibit A for any plaintiff who challenged your adoption of Representative Butler's original plan rather than the one I have recommended to you. Don't expose Waterbury to unnecessary risk of a big lawsuit. Just maintain faith with that concept of a community organized around established neighborhoods, represented by voters broadly empowered across the city. My plan number 3, in my professional opinion, would best accomplish that result and keep you out of court. One more comment as a sort of footnote to what I've told you. I have read the media coverage of the concern on the part of Booley Manor residents, and I want to explain to those many people who are concerned about the way Booley Manor is configured in my Plan 3. Booley Manor, based on the census data that I have, is 31% Hispanic among eligible voters. Keeping Booley Manor in District 5 of my proposed plan is essential to maintaining Hispanics' share at 46.2% of the eligible voters in District 5. Were I to swap territory out, that percentage would decline, and from my standpoint, that would be an irresponsible change to even recommend to you, because it would be construed as diluting Hispanic voting strength. And with that, I will close, and I'm prepared to answer any other questions you may have as we go forward this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Morrison. Our next agenda item is public comment, and filling in for the sheriff is our city clerk.
I'll fill in. First speaker, Richard Wood. Correct?
I meant to start off this section with letting people know that we're going to be limiting it to 2 minutes. Yep.
Good evening, everyone. In the process of deliberating about our agenda and different things that we're doing. At our last meeting, across the other end of the hall here, we had 200 new Americans looking to enjoy the efforts of what we're doing here. A week later, the Board of Education allowed the high holy days of the Muslim community to be put into the school calendar. So democracy is alive and well in Waterbury thanks to the fact that we're all working together with Dr. Morrison and our resident brain trust, Larry Butler. But I think all of us know that working together we can accomplish the new order of business for Waterbury. It may have some bumps in the road, but we're going to get there. We're 99% there between Dr. Morrison and Attorney Casagrande. We've been given the guidance to fit the legal parameters, which is absolutely mandatory. At the same time, we have the working tools of the plans to give the alderman by district the strength and courage that needs to move forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our second speaker, Dave Mercer.
Dave Musino, 101 Shady Brook Lane. I would like to thank the board and Dr. Morrison and his staff for all their hard work and effort putting into this project. But we all know what the best plan is for the city of Waterbury, and that's the Butler plan. I'm sure that the gentleman to my left had every interest in, best interest of all the citizens of Waterbury when they came up with their plan, but it still fell a little short. They have no skin in the game. Whether you choose their plan or not, they're getting paid. Would that be correct? I mean, so they have no skin in the game, so we're going to go with that. I'm pretty sure they're still getting paid. I'm sure the citizens of Waterbury will forgo the $1.40 it would cost each of us as long as you pick the right plan, and that's the Butler plan for the citizens of Waterbury. The game is almost over. The ball's in your side of the court. Are you going to make that shot or are you going to miss it? Please make that shot and choose the Butler plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Lawrence DePillo.
Good evening, Lawrence DePillo, 11 Steuben Street. You know, what I did not hear addressed this evening was part of the discussion at the last meeting, and that had to do with how many aldermen can be seated from the same political party. Now, it was sort of indicated in the paper that the aldermen could all be from the same party. Now, I understand that each party may put up 2 candidates. I understand that candidates may petition on. But a Democrat is still a Democrat, and a Republican is still a Republican, and an independent is still an independent. And if 3 from any of the same party were to be elected, I do not believe because somebody petitioned on, they have the right to be seated. There's been some lawsuits in this area. And only 2 from the same political party may be seated, and the third person who received the lesser of the votes of the same political party would be dropped for the next highest vote getter from a different party. That was the crux of what was discussed at the last meeting, but has not been addressed. And the fact that it was brought up, the fact that it was in the paper indicating that one party may end up serving a district, I believe needs to be clarified since it was brought up to this commission. And I was kind of hoping that was going to happen this evening, but obviously it hasn't. And maybe the commission could direct Mr. Morrison and the attorney that the city hired to answer that question once and for all, and which state law their decision is based on. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Anthony DeGennaro.
When I left here last week, I thought it was narrowed down to the Butler plan and the plan number 3. So I'd like to address these. The Butler map was sold as simple. Initially, it is, but down the line, it could lead to a mess. It is tied to the assembly districts established by Hartford. Hartford did not consider those districts as local districts for the Board of Aldermen. A sign of this is the present situation where a part of Middlebury is part of one of our assembly districts. This could lead to dramatic shifts in population figures within the segments of our city. Plan 3 avoids this pitfall created by the Butler Plan. The basic complaint is for the changes in voting places. This cannot be avoided initially, but should remain, the voting sites should hold for the future, unlike the Butler Plan. As to the people at Bowling Manor, I gave it some considerable thought, and it will no longer be with the East End in the voting district. However, their voting power should be increased. Anyone running in the 6th district would be a fool to ignore the area of approximately 250 homes. Most elections are won by gaining 50 to 55% of the vote. That district could be, the Bowling district could very easily be a swing district in that other district. Remaining in the 4th will only contribute to a larger plurality in that district and certainly diminish the voting power of the people of those 250 homes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker, Jimmy Griffin.
Jimmy Griffin, 41 Pilgrim Avenue. I'm members of the board, mission. I stand before you to say that the first plan that I saw was the one that I supported with the percentage that we have with 35%. However, I just want to remind you that if you're talking about the Voting Rights Act, then the Voting Rights Act should be the priority in this process, and race should be a primary factor in this determining the districts. And I just wanted to remind you that if this percentage that you're looking at is brought forth, there will be a challenge. I just wanted to remind you that there will be a challenge one way or the other. I just wanted to remind you of that.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Joy Brown.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you to each and every one of you for listening to what we had to say and listening to our concerns. It's very important to us that we are heard. Like I say, we're very small, but yet we have a very powerful voice, and we wanted to be able to use that voice. So what we would like to do is to have you really consider the Butler Plan for the city of Waterbury. Primarily, as I spoke with Mr. Morrison when I came in very briefly, he said he wanted to keep the neighborhoods intact. That keeps the neighborhoods intact. The East End is one of the strongest neighborhoods in the city. We have done so much for the city. We'll continue to do things for the city. We have plans for things that we wanted to do. So please help us to stay strong so that we can all work together and make the city even better than it is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker, Chris Orsini.
Thank you. Good evening again. I'm just here again supporting Larry Butler's map and plan. And with all due respect to Dr. Morrison's analysis and his scope of services, I don't think we should be afraid or fear litigation for 0.1%. Although there is a slight variation and you can sue for just about anything, it appears to me that we would not have any problem defending our position for 0.1% throughout the Butler Plan. Furthermore, I think as a city, we would vigorously defend together anybody who tries to throw a wrench into this process, which you guys have done a stellar job of developing and listening, and being part of a process where we all spoke what we felt from the heart. So although Dr. Morrison's analysis can be taken into consideration, and we should not fear the fact that it's only 1/10 of 1% that we're deviating from, the fact of the matter is Larry Butler's map gives us what we were looking for, which is the spirit of a coalition of Waterburyans driving this city forward into the future under a new Alderman by District plan. So let's stand together, keep our neighborhoods the way they are, under the Butler plan, and not fear litigation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Looks like our final speaker, Dennis Buckley.
For the record, Attorney Dennis Buckley, 1062 Meredith Road, Waterbury, which is in the East End. Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, I'll be brief. The circumstance with respect to the determination of membership of the Board of Aldermen that will result as a result of the election has not been in the purview of this particular Commission. I've had conversations with Council. If and when that proves to be a matter of dispute, there's an available remedy, and it falls outside the parameter of this particular Commission. And I don't think it should distract you from your charge, which is the determination of the 5 districts. With respect to that issue, looking at the language of the charter change as approved, I understand this District Reapportionment Commission to be in the circumstance of issuing a report to the Board of Aldermen. Board of Aldermen will determine what the districts are. The language explicitly says that the report which you tender, which I therefore view as a recommendation, may be adopted and or modified. I clearly urge you, subject to referral and consultation both with the demographer and with Council, express your preference and your recommendation among the 3 plans, but I would urge you to consider the submission of all the plans and all the background, so that if perchance the Board of Aldermen chooses to exercise its legal authority and discretion and to consider any modifications, it may look at the other 2 plans which you have not chosen to select and recommend to them, thereby easing their burden when this issue passes to their consideration and their action. Also, the language is adopted, in theory, does not bar the Board of Aldermen from coming up with Plan 4. There's not just 3 plans conceivably out here. There could be a 4th. So before litigation is talked about, why don't we find out what ultimately is adopted? And secondly, this is going to have a 5-year life. It's had a lot longer life in getting to this point about multi-member districts. Why don't we try it and see how it works? And if we're dissatisfied, modify it in due course without litigation. That might be the community approach and the community way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Apologize, 2 more speakers. Larry Butler.
Good evening. My name is Larry Butler, State Representative, former Alderman, and lifelong resident of the city. I helped draft this plan because I love Waterbury. I love Waterbury above all else, never mind the political shenanigans and anything else. And my purpose for doing this is to have good government in the city that I live in and plan to live here as long as I can. I just wanted to actually make the point that it was never suggested that the plan that I drafted would not stand up to a legal challenge before tonight. Never heard that. And just by the handout you got tonight, if you look at the numbers between the Butler plan and the best version of Dr. Morrison's plan, which is plan number 3, I would direct your number to the total deviation amount for the total population under the Butler plan. It's 2.31. And the Morrison plan is 9.8. Okay, that's the difference. I think 2.1 is a lot better than 9.8 when you talk about deviation. Secondly, I don't even buy the challenge of a legal challenge based on the difference, because in the Hispanic population, the percentage is 45.8 versus 46.2 in this plan. 0.4 difference, not even a half of 1%. And in the African American difference, it's 30% versus 30.5. 0.5. I'll take those numbers to court any day to stand up to a legal challenge. And more than anything else, this plan is what the people actually brought forward on the Charter Revision Commission, and I thank you for your service. It's what the Board of Aldermen put before the people of Waterbury for consideration. It's what more than 9,000 people in the city voted for. Okay? So I suggest that we do the business that all those people put before you, and I'd like to thank you for your service, because you're a part of the new good government group here in the city, and I wish you the best. I think it's the best plan, and I wish you well, and thank you in advance for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Gene Sherman.
Gene Sherman, 551 Willow Street. I just got up here because the last meeting we had and tonight's meeting, there's been altogether considerable discussion about who's going to be seated after the elections. I was under the impression that this committee was put together to draw the lines to decide who does the voting, not who gets seated. I don't believe that who is seated or what party they belong to is germane to any of the conversation we've had throughout these meetings. And that's all I wanted to say on that subject. And I do support the Butler plan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, that was the last speaker.
Thank you, Acting Sheriff Dalton. Next order of business, did you want to come up? Attorney Casagrande has the floor for some closing comments from him.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too would like to thank all of you for your time and your patience operating under incredible deadlines to get this done. And I know you've worked hard on this and you've wrestled with it. And I know that the people of Waterbury appreciate your work very much. It's a tremendous commitment of time and stress. We all learned a lot in the last month or two about districting principles, requirements of the federal Constitution, the Voting Rights Act, demographic data, census data, how it should be applied, how it is applied, and its importance in trying to get it right. And I also want to thank all the speakers that came out over these last few weeks in incredibly terrible weather for their commitment and their efforts to make this plan the best it can be. As Dr. Morrison said, we're not talking about them versus us. It's we, the city of Waterbury. And I think we can all agree that everybody in this room shares a common goal, and that is to create a districting plan that is in the best interest of everyone in the city of Waterbury. Not particular groups, not particular interests, but everyone in the city of Waterbury. Should those groups have been heard? Were they heard? Absolutely. But your job is to do what's right for the entirety of the city. I want to thank Dr. Morrison for what I think are his extraordinary efforts over the last 2 months in putting these plans together, working with the speakers, working cooperatively with Mr. Butler, and working to create the best plan possible. And that plan that he's come up with, the final plan, which I'll call Morrison 3, is based on his years, literally decades of expertise and experience in advising municipalities just like yourself who are going through this process. And I want to say a little bit more about that later, his resume. So what's the best plan possible? Number one, it takes into account the desires of the voters, the people who voted for districting, because they wanted better representation of the city's neighborhoods. Number two, it balances traditional districting principles, geographic boundaries, political boundaries, the assembly districts, communities of interest, neighborhoods, traditional interests. And number three, it minimizes, the best plan minimizes the potential of a costly, time-consuming lawsuit under the Voting Rights Act by minority voters who claim dilution of their voting strength. Those are the three things that make up the best possible plan. And as your counsel, my job is to protect you. And my opinion is that that is exactly what Dr. Morrison has done. Based on his experience and his refinement, he heard what the public had to say, he refined his plan, and what he's put before you is his best professional judgment as one of the nation's foremost demographic experts in advising municipalities. That is no small thing. I'm not going to belabor the history of this. We all know what happened. Dr. Morrison presented his plan. That original plan would have, remember, that would have created a 50.2% Hispanic district and another district in which African Americans would have constituted 35.7% of eligible voters. And that plan had a total deviation from substantial equality of about 7.5%. It was criticized by almost all the speakers that came here the first night on the grounds that it didn't sufficiently protect the integrity of the neighborhoods. He heard those speakers. He didn't take his ball and go home. He heard all those speakers, and he went back and he created another plan, Plan 2. And he fine-tuned that one even further, based on further comments of the speakers, to try to do the best that he could to protect the concept of whole neighborhoods. Now, in doing that, his what I'll call Morrison Plan 3 does reduce the Hispanic share of voters in the, I believe it's the 5th district, from 50 to a little over 46%. But it also adds another district where Hispanics and blacks each are 30.5% of the voters. That's what's called a coalition district. And that too creates the potential for blacks and Hispanics in this city, who are the two most prominent minority groups in the city, to elect or participate in the election of candidates of their choice. It acknowledges neighborhoods more than Dr. Morrison's Plan 1, and it accomplishes all this by taking advantage of the wiggle room that I think Dr. Morrison referred to it as, making sure that his plan comes under the 10% deviation. It comes under 10%. It's still green light under the law. It's okay to come in under 10%. Would it be the best possible world would be to come up with an absolute substantial equality of population in all districts? Yes, but you do that at the expense of sacrificing voter minority strength and protection of neighborhoods. That's why it's a balancing act. And in Dr. Morrison's professional opinion, this plan is the most defensible plan against the Voting Rights Act challenge. He's done what you have asked. He's presented the plan that represents not only the concerns of the speakers here, but also the best interests of the people of Waterbury in his professional judgment. And that is your charge, members of the commission, is to recommend a plan to the Board of Aldermen that is in the best interest of all the people in Waterbury. Now, I want to echo what Dr. Morrison said, and I think it's crucial for you to keep in mind. When you vote for Dr. Morrison's Plan 3, you are not rejecting Mr. Butler's approach. I'll say it again. When you vote for Dr. Morrison's Plan 3, you are not rejecting Mr. Butler's plan. Dr. Morrison's Plan 3 incorporates Mr. Butler's concepts. You've heard him thank him. We all thank Representative Butler. It was valuable input into this process. Almost every speaker, at least according to my notes, has applauded Dr. Morrison's revised plan, especially 3, as a significant improvement over his original plan. In other words, he heard the speakers, he heard Mr. Butler, and he came forward with what in the best compromise in his judgment. Is it perfect? No. Will it satisfy every single concern of every single speaker or group who spoke here? No, it won't. But is it the plan that best represents the intent of the voters and minimizes the potential for a challenge? Yes. That's not only my professional legal opinion, it's Dr. Morrison's professional opinion. Again, when you vote for Dr. Morrison's revised plan, you're not rejecting Mr. Butler's plan. Morrison 3 acknowledges Mr. Butler's fine and dedicated contribution. However, if you vote to recommend the Butler plan, that would be a rejection of Dr. Morrison's plan. Okay? A vote for the Butler plan would reject Dr. Morrison's plan. That is, I think you need to consider that that would be a terrible position to put the Board of Aldermen in. Remember, yes, you are the recommending authority. The Board of Aldermen makes the final decision, but the board is looking to you for your wisdom and for your judgment. You sat here and you listened to all the plans and all the speakers, and they're looking to you to do the right thing, the responsible thing. And why would it be a bad idea to just go with Mr. Butler's plan, as well-meaning as it is? And I want to stress that. Because you would then be rejecting the expert testimony of one of the nation's foremost demographic experts who has made a career out of advising municipalities throughout the United States who are faced with what you're faced with and try to steer them clear of legal challenges and comply with the law. That's your ultimate duty, comply with the law. Let me just take a minute. I don't remember the exhibit number, but I submitted it tonight. Let's go through Dr. Morrison's resume very quickly. In addition to his sterling academic credentials, look at his redistricting experience. He has advised municipalities in Arkansas, California, San Diego County, Anaheim, City of Chula, City of Dinuba, City of Downey, City of El Centro, City of Modesto, and others. City of San Diego again in 2000. City of Santa Barbara, City of Santa Maria, City of Santa Pola, City of Stockton, Fresno Unified School District, Long Beach Community College District, Fresno Central Unified District, San Diego Unified School District, excuse me. In Colorado, Alamosa County. In Florida, Tampa. In Georgia, Gainesville. New York State, New York City District Commission. In Massachusetts, the city of Boston and Chelsea. In Washington State, the city of Yakima, most recently. And in all those situations, he either advised the municipalities as to how to comply with the law or helped to defend those cities in litigation. I submit to you, there is no one more qualified in this country to advise you. It is an honor and a privilege for us to have been lucky enough to have him guide us here. And look at the bottom of page 2 of his resume. None of the adopted plans Dr. Morrison has constructed has been challenged in court. Say it again. None of the adopted plans Dr. Morrison has constructed has been challenged in court. We are privileged to have his expertise. I submit it would be foolhardy to ignore it. No one in this room, certainly not me, not the commission, not Representative Butler, none of the other public speakers, is a demographic expert on what cities need to do to protect themselves against a Voting Rights Act challenge. That's why we retained Dr. Morrison, to guide you through this process. He is not here as your adversary. He is here as your advisor. He wants to help you do the right thing. This is not a matter where lay people, and I include myself in that term, can simply ignore expert testimony. The only expert testimony, the matter of Voting Rights Act compliance, and there are, as I told you before, there are legions and legions of federal cases in which reams and reams of scientific evidence and statistical evidence are pounded out through years and years of litigation. But it requires knowledge that all of us don't have. A detailed knowledge of U.S. Census data, how to apply them, statistical knowledge, knowledge of a body of federal case law decisions where districting plans are scrutinized, not on the basis of what interest groups may want in the city, but on whether the plan has the effect, whether intended or not, of diluting minority voting strength. Dr. Morrison has focused his job throughout this process on keeping the city out of court, minimizing the risk of becoming just another defendant in a cost-prohibitive, lengthy, and outcome-uncertain federal litigation. It's very easy to say, don't fear litigation. We can win. Maybe you might. But I say to you, even if you win in that kind of litigation, you lose. Why? Because you will have spent hundreds of thousands, even Dr. Morrison will tell you millions of dollars defending a plan. Now, you need to ask yourselves, if there's going to be litigation, who knows? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. What would you rather have the Board of Aldermen do? Put themselves in the position of ignoring the plan of the only expert to appear before you in these last few weeks, and putting yourself in the hands of a federal judge who doesn't know Waterbury, and his job is to make sure you've complied with the Voting Rights Act. And that's exactly what Dr. Morrison's job has been. Bottom line is, the Butler plan, again, as well-meaning as it was drawn by a person without demographic expertise, and neither do I have that, and by a person with no experience defending cities or steering them away from exposure to a VRA suit. I don't say that as a criticism. I just say it as a fact. It's a fact. You know, I don't know how many of you may have served on land use commissions for the city. And I do a lot of work representing land use commissions. And there's a principle of law in land use commissions that says if a land use commission is considering a matter of technical, that requires technical expertise, and the only evidence before it is the testimony of one expert, the law is you cannot ignore that testimony because lay people just don't have that knowledge, okay? Now, in the land use case, what's the consequence of ignoring the only expert testimony? Court might reverse the commission and the person gets his permit. You ignore the only expert testimony before you hear, the consequences are far more potentially devastating. It affects everyone in the city and exposes people in the city to years of costly and expensive litigation. Several speakers have noted that there's not really a great percentage difference between Mr. Butler's plan in terms of the minority vote percentage and Dr. Morrison's plan. But I can tell you, and he will tell you based on his decades of experience, that it is not so much the difference, the percentage difference, as whether the commission or the board in rejecting Dr. Morrison's plan is going to be deemed by a federal judge as going backward. In other words, of diluting voter minority voting strength. I'm not making that up. Plaintiffs' lawyers, that's what they live for in this arena, okay? So, yes, it's not that much of a difference, but it's a percentage point or so, especially for Hispanics. And that's a lot. That's a lot when it comes to protecting minority voting strength. Representative Butler is a dedicated public official. There's no question about that. Does he have the best interests of the city in his heart here? Absolutely he does. Is his plan more protective against exposure to a lawsuit than Dr. Morrison's? No, it is not. It is less protective. I didn't say that. Your own experts said that. I'm not here to predict the outcome of any potential litigation. I hope there isn't any. But I'm here, my job as your counsel is to advise you on how to minimize that potential. And the plan that most accomplishes that, in my view and the view of Dr. Morrison, is Morrison 3. So in sum, ladies and gentlemen of the Commission, due to Dr. Morrison's great work, the great input of Representative Butler and many other speakers, you're not being asked to make a binary decision here. What do I mean by that? When you vote yes to Dr. Morrison's Plan 3, you are not voting no to Mr. Butler, okay? You are incorporating the best of both, and you are acknowledging not only Mr. Butler's contributions, but also the wisdom, experience, and expertise of your own expert, who we retained to protect you. So I ask you to embrace the two approaches. Let's follow through on the we versus them that we've gone through this entire proceeding on. It is, in the final analysis, in my view, a simple choice. By voting yes or recommending to the Board of Aldermen the adoption of Dr. Morrison's plan, you are protecting the health, safety, and welfare of all people. So I ask you to do what I submit to you is the right thing, the responsible thing, and the thing that protects everyone in Waterbury, and that is to vote to recommend to the Board of Aldermen adoption of Morrison Plan 3. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Casagrande. We are now at the point of discussion by the Commission. I'm losing my voice up here. I'm sorry about that. As a first step, I'd like to take an initial sense from my fellow commissioners. I've asked each and every one of you to come prepared tonight with for discussion purposes, your ranking, where your head is at, so we can move this upon. And each commissioner, I would like to hear your thoughts, your plans, and your potential ranking just for a discussionary. This is not a vote. I am not care where we start. Do we have a normal way of starting, or?
No, you're fine.
Okay. Since I like going from right to left, I would like to start off with Commissioner Salvio, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, I'm choosing as the first one, the Butler plan. It meets the parameters. It has been asked for by the citizens who've spoken to us and people I've spoken with on the streets. And I did say it follows all the parameters, and especially keeps all the neighborhoods together. Number two would be the Dr. Morrison's third. I don't have a third choice.
So you're saying your second choice is Dr. Morrison's plan number 3?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Rodriguez, your thoughts?
Thank you. I, along with Commissioner Salvio, agree that the best plan that I've seen proposed is the Butler plan. For the same reasons he's, iterated. The neighborhoods are kept intact, I believe, in terms of, and we keep discussing minority voter strength. Are we talking about the dilution percentage from the current state house districts as they are presently? And if you were to dilute from that point, I understand that. But I didn't realize that a main focus in this, however nice it would be, is to gain strength, minority strength, and voter strength. We, as a charter commission, when we got together and put this plan forward that was then voted through last November, was to keep these districts as closely resembling the state house districts as they are currently. And from what I've seen, and based on the 0.4% that it would be less for Hispanics and 0.5% less for blacks, I don't understand in terms of litigation how strong an argument you can make in Morrison's plan that it's that much stronger and we've diluted the minority voter strength. Maybe I'm missing something, but from what I've seen, from what's been proposed, from what we envision as a charter, from the people that I've heard speak, majority of people are in favor of the Butler plan because it keeps the integrity of Waterbury and it keeps neighborhoods intact. There's familiarity, and if I were to look at a second plan, to rank a second plan, it would be plan number 3, just for the potential of the coalition that could potentially be formed in the 72nd district between African Americans and Hispanics. But that small of a deviation percentage in terms of 0.4% and 0.5%, I don't see the huge difference where there should be an issue in terms of litigation. For that reason, I believe the Butler plan is in my opinion, the best plan out there.
Thank you. Commissioner Black.
So I did complete my assignment, but before I go there, it behooves me to think that after all the time we spent, all the conversation had in this room, that I am just hearing tonight, or it's being insinuated tonight, that we might not be complying with voting rights, that we could be diluting voter strength, and that the integrity of the voting rights for African Americans and Hispanics will not hold up in court with the Butler plan. When you put something in front of a board, you're putting what's in front that can be held up in court. And to take our time and have us to take this plan and then to come back and say today, this last evening of our meetings, that the Butler plan really, and it's been insinuated all night, doesn't really comply with the Voting Rights Acts. It dilutes the strength and so forth. So, I want to make that statement because if you put 3 plans in front of us, then 3 plans should be able to hold up in court. So with that said, I did do the assignment as recommended, and I did choose the Butler plan as my first choice. And the reason I chose the Butler plan was, again, because based on the numbers and based on the information that was provided to us, it seems to ensure the integrity of the voting rights, the voting strength, both for Hispanics and African Americans. It provided the least disruption to the communities, and we've heard this over and over and over, what was important to this community. And that plan, to me, provided that for us. It kept the neighborhoods the most intact. Obviously, we couldn't do everything that everyone wanted, but that was the plan that seemed to keep things mostly intact. I did choose Plan 3 as my second choice. I honestly felt that it was as close as possible as you can get to the Butler plan, with the exception of District 72, there, with that additional strength there. But again, I just want to express that I'm a little bit perturbed by the fact of all of the information that was provided here this evening, this last evening, particularly information that, you seem to keep expressing and stressing that could put us in a legal bind here in the city of Waterbury and could cost us millions of dollars. So I'm a little disappointed with that information coming in last night.
Well, but under a tight time constraint, we work to the best of our abilities. And I looked at Plan Number 3 as a melding of the important criteria and principles that Larry Butler brought to the table, as well as the expertise of Dr. Morrison. Having said that, I know that my choice would be Dr. Morrison's Plan Number 3 is 1, and then Larry Butler's plan is number 2. And I say that because I believe that we all have some strengths and some weaknesses. I don't have a strength as a demographer. I think Dr. Morrison does. He's got a whole host and history of expertise that I rest my opinion on, and as importantly, as a citizen of this city, and I hope to continue to be here for many years, that this is our first bite at the apple. And I think that where we've come in a very short time needs to rest on the shoulders of the experience of the demographer. So leaving the neighborhoods intact were important, very important to me. Larry Butler's state rep district map locations were also a very critical component. And last but not least, the federal guidelines and the rules. So I think that in order to meet all of those, there's some give and take, and that's why I'm trying to justify my choice of Dr. Morrison's Plan Number 3 as my first choice. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Pizzuto. Commissioner Green, if you would be so kind.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to rank Morrison Plan Number 3 as my first choice and Butler's plan as my second choice. It's my opinion that we should probably get rid of Morrison Plan Number 2, as the third plan really just built upon his first and second plan as we went forward. But, I also sat on Charter Revision, and the Butler Plan and the Morrison Plan 3 are more similar than they are dissimilar. There obviously are some differences there, but the fact that if the city adopts Morrison Plan Number 3, we would have the foremost expert in our corner to back us up if anything happened. And I don't want to be Chicken Little here and say it's going to, but if something happened, and the fact that we would have him in our corner would be a great asset to the city. As far as ranking all the good reasons of the Morrison Plan, it's kind of hard once we got those nice long reports from the attorney and the doctor. I agree with pretty much everything they said, and that is my ranking of the plans.
Thank you, sir. Commissioner Templeton.
Good evening. I'm going to just start out and say that when I voted in November, we voted based on the goals of the charter revision, and what the people wanted in Waterbury was representation in all 5 districts. So I looked at all the maps and everything, and I considered Butler Plan Number 1 and Plan Number 3, the Morrison Plan. Some of the movement in the Butler Plan seemed to have little impact on the total population. That was just my opinion. And I was reading in some of the information that Dr. Morrison said there might be minor inconsistencies that might be finally resolved once the commissioners have selected the one plan they agreed to recommend. So I'm assuming that even if we take Plan 3 or Plan 2, there still could be some adjustments made, and I'm not sure if that would be made before it goes to the aldermen or if they would be allowed to make some of the adjustments. That was just my opinion.
So your ranking is Butler number 1 and Morrison number 3.
Right.
Okay.
But also with that little comment, because nobody mentioned that there might be little minor adjustments that could be made to either one.
Duly noted. Thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Colo is traveling home tonight, and we may hear from him en route once he lands up at Bradley, and that's what the Polycom unit is for. So in lieu of that, I finally get to talk, and I've kept my mouth shut for these last month, but I want to start off and let people know as a background who I am. I have an engineering and technology arena at ESPN for the last 35 plus years. I'm simply a technical person, no matter how hard I try to camouflage it. I eat engineering, mathematics, and everything scientific up whenever I get the chance. Surprising to no one, or surprising to some, my favorite television network is not ESPN. It's the NASA channel. I'm a geek. As chairman of this commission, I have tried to be as impartial as humanly possible. I've kept my eyes, ears, and brain wide open during these proceedings. That's the engineering trait in me. I've also kept my mouth shut to others around me, except when I talk to myself. I do that a lot, so as to ensure my fair and impartial perspective on these proceedings. I came into this responsibility with no motivation other than to listen, digest what I've learned, and then cast support on a recommendation. I've held off doing any independent research on this topic because I did not want to come to any premature conclusions until it was absolutely necessary. Well, it's absolutely necessary now. After our last meeting, I'm now speaking as a fellow commissioner, passing on my position on this selection. Our first meeting in December was an eye-opener for me. I deduced from the numbers of people in the audience that this topic was key and important to the community. Please don't forget, I'm apolitical. I'm unaffiliated. I have no side in this. I have no skin in the game other than I'm a citizen. Our second meeting was just as enlightening for me because the passion and viewpoints voiced at that meeting about Plan Number 1 got my attention. The submission of Larry Butler's plan seemed simple enough and common sense because it exhibited no disruption in the current districting delineated by the General Assembly state representative maps. After finishing that second meeting, I felt the activity would be no simpler than sewing a quilt together based on pre-cut pieces of existing districts that were already in play. It was a much more normalized meeting on January 14th when Dr. Morrison produced his Plan Number 2, which exhibited a deeper correlation, as been noted, to what Larry Butler's plan echoed. At that meeting, especially during the neighborhood overlap issues, it started to remind me of engineering problem similarities. Even after that meeting, I still kept my mind open thinking that this was a creative design effort. When Dr. Morrison presented his Plan Number 2 at the end of that meeting, he said something that caught my attention, that he had to scrub the data for a better graphic representation. I started to reflect on my perception of quilt making versus logical clarity. When Dr. Morrison returned on the 22nd with his scrubbed map and his presentation that mentioned boundaries, constraints, and demographic parameters, it then hit me that this was not a quilt making exercise, but it was really more like an engineering or mathematical effort because of those aforementioned terms: boundaries, constraints, demographic parameters. After our meeting on the evening of the 22nd, I had a conversation with myself on the way home. I was beginning to come to the conclusion that the normative approach that I initially perceived, or what ought to be, versus the positive analysis that was starting to solidify in my brain, the quantifiable data in science, made me stop and think. I was beginning to mentally deliberate that this effort was more like an engineering effort and felt that I'd better start doing some research on what I was now beginning to perceive. So I went back and already started right from the beginning with our mission documents from December 11th meeting. The name of our group is the District Reapportionment Commission, and I quite frankly needed to get a proper definition of what the word apportionment actually meant. So from Wikipedia, quote, "The legal term apportionment means distribution or allotment in proper shares," end of quote. I concluded, that's simple, it's arithmetic. But I pressed a little bit further from the political perspective and found, quote, "Apportionment is the process of allocating the political power of a set of constituent voters among their representatives in a governing body," end of quote. I mentioned myself, nothing new, similar definition. I also found a section at on that page in Wikipedia that echoed on the mathematics of apportionment. Quote, "There are," and I'll stop a lot of the noise in between, but at the end of the quote it says, "The article on the largest remainder method presents several schemes and discusses their trade-offs with examples, end of quote. That term, largest remainder method, struck a memory cell with me. Years ago, I took a discrete mathematics course over at Wesleyan University. The book we used was entitled Excursions in Modern Mathematics by Dr. Peter Tannenbaum. In his book, in chapter 4, entitled The Mathematics of Apportionment, and luckily I still had the book and the lecture notes sitting on my bookshelf. That's what I was doing this weekend while everybody else was looking at the Super Bowl. There in that notebook was my handwriting. Outline/learning objectives. Number 1, to implement the methods of Hamilton, Jefferson, Huntington Hill, Adams, Webster to solve apportionment problems. To state the allocation quota rule and determine when it's mathematically satisfied. To identify paradoxes when they occur and provide alternative proofs. To understand and prove the significance of Belansky and Young's impossibility theorem. Well, this brought back a lot of memories. Some good, mostly bad. The key is that I revisited the mathematics of electoral system design and it helped my desire for logical clarity. Additionally, I also found a couple of other websites that helped steer me towards the esoteric side of electoral system design. Well, my reaction was, my God, these all sound like technical specifications for building something. If this is where the discipline is headed, then I have to redirect my thinking efforts. This is where I convinced myself that apportionment and voting district design was definitely a lot like stitching a quilt together. I view myself as a quick learner. I decided to return with a different mindset after our January 22nd meeting. I started thinking more like an engineer again. I reviewed everything from this perspective all over again. It did give me some comfort in the fact that our meetings were all very similar to how my engineering career has been. Plan number 1 was our initial design. You get feedback, you recalculate, you modify, you come back again with an alternative, plan number 2. The iterative approach of doing this was very engineering, and it was very refreshing. When I compared the original Butler plan proposal with the current plan number 3, as already mentioned by Dr. Morrison and Attorney Casagrande, I see plan number 3 as being the optimized Butler draft. In my opinion, what Dr. Morrison has done is that he's applied an engineering mathematical approach to produce an optimized solution that delivers robustness and minimal legal risk, which is also one of our primary tasks in this commission. His plan that has utilized, from my quick calculation, 46 years of experience. I believe he started at Rand in 1969, if I read your resume correctly. It protects us from any potential legal battles. Our job as commissioners is to decide on the best plan for our fellow citizens, as well as protecting our city from needless expenses to defend us from potential lawsuits. To wrap up my comments, I just want to say one of my favorite authors is Malcolm Gladwell. In his best-selling book, Outliers, he repeatedly mentions the 10,000-hour rule, claiming that the key to success in any field, to a large extent, is a matter of practicing a specific task for a total of around 10,000 hours. Well, I did the quick calculation while people were talking. And since 1969, Dr. Morrison, when you started your journey, I calculate that you have close to 89,000 hours of mastering experience to your credit. And in a court of law, I can think of no one else to be representing my city as an expert witness. This is not a decision on popularity. I say that because Larry Butler and I have been friends since 1969. We were both high school sophomores at Wilby. We went to school together, we played football together. He's my representative, and I consider him my close friend. But the mindset where I come from as an engineer and purely logical clarity, plan number 3 outweighs as a winner on my side of the equation because it is inclusive of Larry's plans. It's an improvement on Larry, and it gives us a sense of protection from any potential legal risks. And from my corporate life, I've been trained as a corporate officer for ESPN to be as risk-averse as I possibly can. Thank you for this honor. So, could we possibly take a 10-minute recess so I can get my throat back? Because it is really hurting. Is that okay? Dr. Morrison.
I would like to suggest a productive use of the commissioner's time during that 10 minutes. And I'm here simply to make sure that those of you who have said, in effect, Mr. Butler's plan does a better job of keeping the neighborhoods together, and also several of the speakers at the mic this evening who said, I favor Mr. Butler's plan because it does, in effect, a better job of keeping the neighborhoods together. I just want you to understand what I'm talking about. If by keeping neighborhoods together you mean a higher percentage of neighborhoods kept together, or more of all the neighborhoods that you recognize kept together, I would ask you to go out to the map and look at the map and count the number of neighborhoods that have been kept together on my plan. That is to say, where you see a neighborhood that is entirely outlined in red dashed lines within one of the districts I've formed. Count up the number of those neighborhoods that are kept whole on my plan, and do the same on Dr. Butler's plan, and you will see that something I reminded you of a couple of weeks ago, but I should have reiterated tonight more forcefully. The number of neighborhoods that I have kept intact exceeds the number of neighborhoods that Dr. Butler has kept intact. And that is not a fault or a flaw. That is simply a statement of how I have tried to optimize, starting with Mr. Butler's plan, to say I can take his plan and I can, as I recall, keep 6 more neighborhoods intact while splitting only one other one. So there was a net increase of 5. So if by neighborhoods you mean the neighborhoods shown on the map, I think you have misunderstood what the contrast is. If by neighborhoods you mean the state rep districts, then that statement doesn't apply. But I just would ask you, in a purely neutral fashion, go out and count them up yourself, and you will see that the number of neighborhoods kept intact under my Plan 3 exceeds those of Mr. Butler's by something around 5 more in my favor. Thank you. So you know what you're voting.
Thank you, Dr. Morrison. I would like to propose a 10-minute recess so I can get my voice back together. Sure. But I would also encourage my fellow commissioners to chew on what everyone said here, and when we come back, we'll readdress it and see if anyone has rethought their position. Thank you. Hello, this is just an information update. We're still waiting for our 8th Commissioner Colo to be calling in. His plane is just landed at Bradley. He will be calling in, and I believe he deserves the time since he's been with us right from the very beginning. So I beg for your indulgence, and we'll get back to you as soon as he calls in. We're going to get back to the proceedings, and I was wondering if I could have a motion on where we want to go next on a vote.
Mr. Chairman, if I can, I don't know, I reach out to my fellow commissioners, maybe they had time for reflection out in the hallway. You may want to ask if anyone has changed their mind, and I'd like to make an amendment to my motion. Well, motion to return back to the regular order of business, first of all. So we need an approval on that. I vote yea.
Second.
Okay.
So approved.
Okay.
Anyone want to add in discussion, comment?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, being no more further discussion, I'd like to make a motion to my fellow commissioners, given the priority of plans, that we send up Representative Butler's plan
as well as the demographer, Dr. Morrison's plan. And I say that because the aldermen have complete discretion at the plans. We want Dr. Morrison's expertise, we want Representative Larry Butler's, his obviously commitment to this plan, but I think it's imperative that the votes from every member of this board go to the aldermen. Now, they can craft something completely different, but I don't want to lose, we hired a demographer with his expertise. If that just goes away, we did that for naught. So I think that it's imperative that we say to the aldermen, the commission has voted in favor of Representative Butler's plan, and secondly, and almost as closely, Dr. Morrison's plan, would you please consider either one or both or the best of the two combined, or a completely new plan. But if we send them only one plan, and I would make this motion even if Dr. Morrison's plan came, I would ask that we would send up representatives. So the motion is such that we send both plans to the Board of Aldermen.
Do we have a second?
Second the motion.
Discussion? Comments? Shall we take a vote?
Yes, do a roll call.
Yep.
Sunday Black.
Yes.
Jeffrey Green. Charles Pagano.
Yes.
William Pizzuto.
Yes.
Roberto Rodriguez.
Yes.
Michael Salvio.
Yes.
Joyce Templeton.
Yes.
7 yes.
The motion to send it up to the Board of Aldermen has been carried and approved. And with that, our mayor would like to address us.
I would. Good evening, all, and thank you for your incredible amount of hard work. I thank not only all of you commissioners, I thank all the members of the public who have participated. I thank Mr. Morrison and Attorney Casagrande for their work. I think this was quite an exercise in watching the system and how the process works. I have kept myself very much removed from all this, with the exception, of course, of hiring the people that I thought that you needed to hear from and make your decisions any way you wanted to. I think that you've done a great job, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chairman, all you committee members. I'm proud of all of you for the time and the effort that you've put in. And as I said to you before, I really enjoyed watching it, especially from the sidelines, because when you're in this office, you don't get to watch many things from the sidelines. Some people ask me why I wasn't participating a little bit more. And to be quite frank with you, is I really did want to watch the process. And while I guess we don't have any definitive answers tonight, I think that your vote, your 7-0 vote to send both plans to the Board of Aldermen is probably the best thing you could have possibly done. There are pluses and minuses to both plans. I strongly commend Representative Larry Butler for putting the time and effort into his plan. Other plans that came before you that didn't get this far, I commend those people for their input and their great work. It just goes to show you, we believe in our city and we're passionate about our beliefs. The Morrison plan, of course, you've heard the logic behind that, and that's certainly a very credible plan as well. So I just want to take a moment of your time to really commend all of you for your great work, and I'm proud of you for sending both plans to the Board of Aldermen. And from there, you're certainly going to be allowed to weigh in with your comments and your opinions, and let the elected officials, the Board of Aldermen, make that decision. Thank you.
Thank you. So, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Second.
Everyone, thank you very much. It's been an incredible experience. Have a good night, and stop looking at maps. This meeting's adjourned.
You know what?
Dr. Morrison, thank you.
When